Gilgamesh. What do we know about him and since when? In 1872, in the Ni Nawa region in Iraq, while a British researcher was excavating an Assyrian palace, workers discovered a hole in the ground that was nothing but the entrance to a hall containing thousands of clay figures collected by one of the kings in the first half. From the 3rd millennium BC. British cuneiform expert George Smith read some of this number and found in it for the first time the name Gilgamesh. From that day on, the features of this Sumerian story myth began to become clear. It is a legend that was written and rewritten over and over again over a period that spanned about 2,000 years. Thus, it includes more than 3,000 lines of epic poetry. Certainly, extracting the entire story is not an easy matter, especially since the figures that narrate some aspects of this legend are scattered in museums around the world. Some numbers describe Gilgamesh as being 2/3 god and 1/3 human. In his youth, Gilgamesh was nothing but a king who loved his goods and treated his subjects with condescension. He was violent with his opponents, and he was a ruler who oppressed his people, who lost hope and turned to the sky for help, which responded by sending Enkidu. Enkidu, who used to live in harmony with nature and beasts, is brought to the city by a seductress to confront Gilgamesh after spending 7 nights of seduction with him. In Uruk, the capital, the two men meet: Gilgamesh, the God King, and Enkidu, the messenger. They spend the night in a bloody fight because Enkidu prevented Gilgamesh from spending the first night with a bride from Gilgamesh's followers, as he always did that as it was his right. As dawn breaks and the battle is not resolved in favor of either of them, they lie on the ground exhausted. Their equal power makes them friends. Here, Gilgamesh discovers the limitations of his power and knows that he must not overuse his power. Authority over the city became the right of both. The two began to think about expanding their kingdom, so they journeyed together to the Cedar Mountains and fought the forest guard, Humbaba, and killed him. The goal is to obtain the cedar wood needed for the roofs of the great halls of the royal palace and the boats, wood that is not available in the vicinity of Uruk. Gilgamesh builds a majestic temple to Inanna Ishtar, a goddess revered by the people of Uruk, and to whom they offer sacrifices to protect the city and its people. Every year, a fertility celebration is held in this temple, and among its rituals is Gilgamesh having intercourse with a virgin priestess. This is what was prepared for Gilgamesh after his victorious return from the Cedar Mountains. During the preparations, Inanna Ishtar appears and tries to seduce him and take him as her husband, but Gilgamesh refuses because she was seducing her lovers and then killing them. Inanna Ishtar disappears, angry, and spiteful. Immediately, it was decided to infect Enkidu with a fatal fever in retaliation against Gilgamesh, who was greatly saddened by his friend. Here, Gilgamesh realizes the inevitability of death. Gilgamesh abandons all his interests in fighting and having fun and goes in search of immortality. He goes on a long, exhausting journey to search for the only person who can help him in his endeavor. He reaches the edge of the earth where the sun sets behind a plateau and where he sees a dark spot in the middle of the plateau. It is the door to the path of the sun, a world other than the world of humans. After a journey full of battles, Gilgamesh reaches the shore of the waters of death. On an island not far away, there lives an immortal wise man, Utnapishtim, who and his wife survived the flood thanks to the boat they built. Gilgamesh demands to know the details of the flood and how to achieve immortality. Utnapishtim replied that what he was asking was impossible and asked him to stay awake for 7 consecutive nights. But Gilgamesh fails his test. If he was unable to resist the drowsiness that is half death, how could he ask for immortality? In an attempt to console him, the sage tells him about the plant of immortality, so Gilgamesh goes and fetches it from the depths of the ocean. He lies on the beach, rests from the toil of the adventure, and falls asleep for a while. A snake approaches his hiding place and devours the plant, and from that day, her skin and youth are renewed. Here, Gilgamesh discovers the mirage of his dream, and that he is only human. He returns to Uruk, carrying with him the great lesson he learned, one of which is to protect his people and fulfill their requirements. He returned to become a shepherd who wanted to be immortal. He realized that immortality lies in the deeds one leaves behind. So upon his return to Uruk, he orders the making of 1,000,000 tiles to be used in building a protection wall for the city, 11 kilometers long and 9 meters high, and building a great city with its houses and orchards. It is a monument whose remains can be recognized today, 5,000 years after its construction. This was confirmed by a German mission in 1936, which said that its construction dates back to the period between 2900 and 2600 BC. A number containing the name Gilgamesh was also found in the same area. Today, geological studies confirm that the land of Uruk was full of orchards, streams, and water canals connected to the Euphrates, which allows it to be said that it deserves to be called the Venice of the desert. Some new figures narrated how Gilgamesh died and was buried with his servants in a tomb in the Euphrates that Gilgamesh himself had prepared. However, nothing confirms the contents of this number, despite the availability of tombs from which it appears that they belonged to kings who were buried with their servants. And all of this is not enough to know whether Gilgamesh really and truly existed, or if the matter is just a myth with wonderful contents in any case. And it is, according to his words in the novel, the most beautiful thing that remains of him if he actually existed.